So I wanted to make a video to explain my process for programming for rugby athletes. There's a lot of different squads I work with at various levels of the game. There's a lot of individual athletes I work with at various levels of the game. So I want to show you the generalized approach on a weekly basis. And because it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to get into the day-to-day a bit better rather than starting from an annual cycle because it can vary quite a bit. So I want to show you what it will look like. So depending on the squad, depending on the individual, game day might be Saturday, and that might determine a few different things for us in terms of our scheduling and our training focus. You can see at the bottom of the schedule the approximate total daily intensities for the sessions. Game day is 100%. Prime and prehab is actually 45%. People think that prime and prehab is like, oh, it's fast. It must be really tough sessions. The priority for prime and prehab is that people feel like people feel good afterwards. They're moving well. They're feeling ready for the next day. Not to, oh, I need to hit a PB, so I've got to train really hard. It's like that's where you're going to get huge training associated fatigue and going into a game zapped. It may not necessarily be muscle soreness because you haven't had the time to accumulate that yet, but you might just be absolutely zapped. So we don't want you feeling very tired. We want you feeling fresh when you feel like the body's moving really well. So that is the priority for prime and prehab. The pitch days 1 and 2 again can be formatted slightly differently. Pitch day 1 tends to be a bit more of acceleration focus, a bit more workload. Pitch day 2 tends to be slower. Essentially, there's less going on. It's more strategic, more tactical work. But again, I'm not a skill coach. I wouldn't assume to know the best way of doing that, but that tends to be the format. We have a strength session in the middle of the week. This can vary. The format of this can vary. The examples I have at the end of the video are of the second weekly schedule. Monday's hypertrophy session is very moderate as well. But the priority of these hypertrophy sessions is recovery, blood flow, everything like that. It's not about training to exhaustion or anything like that. It's to stimulate, not annihilate. And again, we double up on quite a bit of our sessions. So pitch day 1 is acceleration. Prime and prehab has acceleration focusing in there. I don't train max velocity in season for players right now. It's because I can't really monitor what they get to do on the pitch and in game. So without GPS units or without a very detailed map of what's going on in the week, I feel like that would loan itself to probably overworking hamstrings at very high velocities very quickly. So I've tended towards low to moderate volumes of accelerations depending on the day there are. Again, you can see the highest we get up to is about 70% in the week in this example of calendars or calendar example in season. One thing I would say is that I try and build up my athletes in pre-season to tolerate a fairly high workload, so that they're doing something almost every day. Again, it doesn't mean that they're doing very hard training, but they're doing something every day, so they can tolerate certain exercises and things like that in season. So I'm very careful with including the likes of Romanian deadlifts or Nordic variations where there's a lot of eccentric load on the hamstrings because hamstrings can take quite a bit of time to recover due to their fiber type composition and again the demands on the hamstrings throughout the week with multiple pitch sessions and stuff like that. So their recovery can be hampered due to just the amount of activity that gets placed on them. But also the prime exercises that people tend to go to create a lot of muscle damage for them. So early in the season or pre-season, I'm trying to build up a chronically high workload, so that if there is any fluctuations or variations, there is that kind of flexibility and tolerance for it. The second calendar format I tend to see is maybe a midweek game. So this is more common for under 20s players, under 18 and a halves. The likes of midweek, maybe it's Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I've had great success with under-20s players doing prime and prehab, and while say senior squads have been training away, like a hypertrophy session for the senior squads and a prime and prehab for the under-20s, using the output devices to drive intent, monitor jump performance, and everything like that. It's great fun to see. There's a few lads I won't name, but they would come up to me and be like, "Jeff, this is great. Feeling, finish a session. It's 45-minute, 50-minute session. Jumps, throws, fast lifts, and lightweight, hitting PBs, and they're feeling great. And they go into the game just buzzing. So prime and prehabs they're quite easy sessions. You see with a total daily intensity kind of prescription, but they can be quite potent. The priority for the prime and prehab is to feel good. It's to move well and move fast. It's not about kind of cooking the body or anything like that. It's about stimulating, not annihilating. Hypertrophy and recovery. It's hypertrophy and recovery, really. It's about getting the body moving after a game day. It's about kind of kicking things back into gear. If it's a midweek game, I tend to recover. I recommend get moving straight away. Don't become stagnant. So for this example, I have technically it's game day Wednesday, Thursday is hypertrophy recovery. Friday would technically be pitch day once, mistake on my part. On Saturdays, then in this format, I tend to do strength and acceleration together. It's a high intensity session. And I explain how these sessions are formatted. But again, you'll see that while we're doing something every day, the intensity doesn't shoot up that high. We're depending on the training distribution and the tolerance in it, what it looks like, it's 65-70% training. Making sure that we feel good for the game. How I tend to program. As we get close to game day, total volume should drop because it's the prime driver of fatigue. We don't want people showing up to game days sore, stiff, sluggish, anything like that. We want them feeling fresh, fit, and fast. Like everything feeling good. So we can integrate a couple different concepts here. Velocity-based training is a really valuable tool. So we use the output devices to do that. But you can also see here the percentages of 1 rep max. The strength speed session on the based off of velocity-based training curve here. The strength speed is what I would typically do for our hypertrophy days, but I'm only going in around 75%. I don't go up to 80%. I think typically, depending on the athlete, some I might go a little bit higher than 75% with, but I tend to not. I don't want to. We're not training to be a powerlifter. We're not training to be a bodybuilder. We're training for rugby, and that should inform our decision in terms of our sessions. The productivity of our sessions is not measured in the rep sets or PBs of what weight you lift. It's how good can you perform the pitch for rugby players. So it's all built around facilitating that. So if they do hit PBs and everything like that, it should be in the context of, okay, that's really going to help you now on Saturday or game day or whenever it is. So strength speed, that's our hypertrophy session because it's a low velocity. We're not looking at max kind of speed outputs, can be controlled a little bit better. The strength sessions, I tend to kind of overlap with our accelerations on Saturdays in this scheduling format. Tend to be the max power. So the max power between that kind of 1.1 and 1 meters per second, or 0.95 to 1.1 meters per second. I'm looking really fast, very moderate weights. Again, it's between 50 and 70%. We tend to be about 60% your 1 rep max. So imagine something that's a 6 out of 10 in difficulty to move. You're moving that as fast as possible. It's not a very heavy weight. So you're not moving, you're not having to kind of recover from a lot of volume. It's just about a small amount of work done very well. So the intent is there. So as volume declines, velocity should increase to the point where we're on prime and prehab. The percentage 1 rep max is very low, in and around say 50%, 30 to 50%, and it's a speed, very low volume. So that's essentially how the week looks. Now the content of those sessions varies. As I said, the volume decreases, the velocity increases. Things that constantly get hit are vulnerable areas on the pitch. So hamstrings are pretty much soft tissue number one that I care about. Then you're looking at shoulders. It's more like again, connective tissue impact driven issues with the shoulders. Ankles can be another one. Connective tissues can be a mix of, just rolling ankles or contact or based injuries. And then the neck as well is another one for concussions. Again, we want to see a strong neck reduces the frequency and severity, or can decrease the frequency or severity of a concussion, or concussion risk on the pitch. So we do neck isos at the end of sessions. We're doing hamstring bridges or Nordic isometrics. Again, these can change massively depending on the squad I'm working with, the athlete I'm working with. There are 16-year-old athletes that I'm working with, for 16-year-old props that I'm working with, that have developed huge tolerances for workload. So I can trust that this person can recover, they'll feel good. I know what I can get away with because of this individual. There are squads of senior players or 20-year-olds that I know you do not have the recovery capacity that I might have, or might be able to assume with other squads. So I need to decrease this or choose a different exercise. So it does have an element of variability there, but I do single leg hamstring bridges, single leg Nordic isos, so the hamstring bridges and isometric as well. The Copenhagen side plank as well. Groins is another one I'm particularly concerned about. Groin strength can be quite representative of freshness and performance readiness. So I want groin strength to be there. There's a lot of core work as well. Lower back can be quite a common injury as well, not necessarily specifically to rugby players, but just in general, athletes, they at some point in their careers or athletic careers, lower backs tend to creep in there. And then, yeah, spring ankle holds, we pair that up with our rudiment hops, anything like that, to create a bit of stiffness or robustness around the ankle as well. One I really love using is a step through. So from a bear crawl position, stepping through, it creates it creates a huge demand for stability and control through the shoulder joint. So I love using that as well. So we, build up a tolerance through bear crawls, forward, backwards, left and right, monkey crawls, and then like step throughs can be a really good progression into that. Now, this is one where you can see, one thing I would say is if you are going to pause this and look at the workouts, disregard the intensity. There is actually a player that this suits, but I have in mind this would suit, but it's a very specific. So our strength, speed, or our hypertrophy session, it's going to be a lower velocity in and around 75%. You can see the notes for the hex bar deadlift, 65, 75%. One thing I would mention is I tend to avoid heavy weights for like conventional deadlifts or anything like that. Because even as relative to deadlifts, even if it was 65, 75%, conventional deadlifts are really intense. They're very strong lifts, and very demanding. So we can get essentially that zap nervous system afterwards. So I pick my lifts quite particularly as well, because even relative intensities for different lifts can be very strenuous too. So hex bar deadlifts are quite friendly. Bulgarian split squats, they're a burner, but they're not actually too tough because what muscle groups they tend to target, they tend to recover fairly well. Bench press, chin ups, bottoms up press, inverted row, specific rest times, moderate volumes. Again, that's the session we'll tend to have after a game day, and the priorities blood flow and recovery. So this one will change massively. I might get people just to do like arms and shoulders and abs and just foam roll out their legs just to reduce that sensation of soreness. And this one can be very flexible. It's about recovery and feeling good. The power and strength, or the strength workout, I tend to pair with accelerations, especially for the midweek game day. And when I know I'm going to do this session on a Saturday with the Sunday completely off, I'll pair up my acceleration work and some throws as well as some lifts. But again, the lifts are more like tempo controlled. It might be a slow eccentric but fast concentric. So the weight as a whole is quite moderate. So the RDLs, depending on the group, I might not use RDLs at all with some groups. If I think they may not recover from them, I don't use them. As much as we want to say like, oh, you should hinge in this way and that, use a hip thrust, use something else, use an isometric to target the hamstrings, use your plyometrics or your speed prep to target and prepare the hamstrings. But you don't need to do like heavy eccentric work, in my opinion, if you think that that person or that group won't be able to recover from it. You're just going to do them a disservice trying to help them. Then I use heavy isometrics, overcoming isometrics, superset with a box squat, prioritizing bar speed in our primary prehab, landmine press, single arm dumbbell row, Pallof press as a circuit emphasizing speed, and then our ankle isometrics and waders walk. That's our primary prehab. Move moderate weights fast, and then protect the vulnerable areas. And I'm going to show you just something that I always go back to is the iris reports on an annual basis. So your heads, which is going to be your concussions, your shoulders, typically as a result of contact, ankles, and you see another one, posterior thigh, which is your hamstrings, a very high injury rate too. So that's like essentially, the fourth on the list that just doesn't get highlighted as much. But this is all the information that I tend to consider first. The format of the week, the injuries that come up in the sport, specifically the rugby, it'll be the iris reports I look at. There's quite a bit in terms of on pitch volumes and conditioning demands in terms of total volume covered and everything like that. Rugby is very interesting because of the positional demands. You can split it quite clearly between forwards and backs in terms of forwards are not going to hit nearly the same velocities as backs, but they have far more collisions to try and deal with. So there's differences in the kind of demands of the training there. And backs, again, the velocity bandwidths they're going to be hitting and frequencies of sprints and everything like that can be more game specific. If I had more of an opportunity to monitor on pitch sessions in terms of like GPS units, what players were getting exposed to regularly, and then in games as well, what they're getting exposed to regularly and what they're not getting exposed to regularly. So if they are hitting max velocity or not, it's again depends. It's a consideration of mine in terms of the acceleration. I know a few coaches won't program for max velocity in season just because the game is meant to address that stimulus, and acceleration is a prime demand for all positions anyway. They need to be able to accelerate effectively. The average distance covered in game in a high intensity effort is about 10 to 15 meters anyway. That's still acceleration focus. So you're not even getting up to max velocity with a max intent. So we're still targeting that. It's not that I'm neglecting it. It's just I'm cautious around max velocity work and with in season as well. When games are supposed to be addressing it, if I had the information, I would probably implement it in some form. But I hope this was informative. I want to do more content that is just, again, information heavy. I'm going to use this. It's going to go up on the YouTube. I came to a conclusion that it needs a long form medium. I couldn't put this up on the Instagram. So hopefully this is useful and interesting. And if you have any questions, you can comment or send me a message or anything like that. And I'll do my best to address them. But thanks for watching, and catch you soon.